Further supplementaries? Then question number 3, the Honourable Bill English.
Madam Speaker, my question is to the Prime Minister and asks, has she been advised of the statement made by Mr Owen Glenn to the Privileges Committee in regard to a meeting between her and Mr Glenn in February 2008, quote, "I also told her of my conversation with the Labor Party President Mr Williams before I agreed to make that donation back in 2005. And does she agree that Mr Glenn told her that?"
Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Dr Michael Cullen.
Madam Speaker, I'm aware of the statement and that he mentioned he had had discussions with Mr Williams, a fact which of course has been confirmed by Mr Williams.
Supplementary question, the Honourable Bill English.
Is she also aware that in August 2005, just prior to the 2005 election, Mr Glenn asked Mike Williams for his views on meeting Winston Peters before Mr Glenn's meeting with Peters, and then after the meeting was completed, Owen Glenn also contacted Mike Williams, and that this exchange occurred before the discussion about the donation itself?
Madam Speaker,
the Honourable Dr Michael
I don't
Cullen.
have those specifics, but clearly on a number of occasions Mr Williams and Mr Glenn met because Mr Glenn was a donor to the Labor Party.
Supplementary question, the Honourable Bill English.
Why does the Prime Minister believe Mike Williams' public statements that he had no role in arranging the Glenn donation when he was discussing with Mr Glenn his first meeting with Winston Peters before the election in 2005, and then was also party to the discussion in December 2005 when the matter of a donation arose, and Mr Glenn said that he only made the donation because Mike Williams approved it?
Speaker,
the Honourable Dr Michael
in
Cullen.
relation, oh dear me, in relation to the August 2005 conversation, clearly that conversation could not have been about the donation or the payment of money into Mr Henry's legal account, because that was to assist with legal costs for an electoral petition in relation to the election which hadn't yet been held. On the other matter, of course, Mr Williams states very clearly that the discussion with Mr Glenn on that matter was about whether Mr Peters had a chance of winning his electoral petition. Mr Glenn asserts the opposite. There is a conflict. In the same way that Mr Glenn claimed that Mr Williams turned up unannounced at his French home, when in fact Mr Williams owed to produce an email showing that he was invited by Mr Glenn to come to that home.
Supplementary question, the Right Honourable Winston Peters.
Is it a fact from the evidence, because the evidence is somewhat important, that Mr Glenn was interested in seeing me because he found me, quotes, a very interesting man, end of quotes, something widely shared around this country, and that was before the election, and therefore nothing to do with party funding also was confirmed as being part of the conversation at all.
The Honourable Dr Michael Cullen.
Madam Speaker, that is my understanding. Indeed, Mr Glenn, I think, made that particular part of what Mr Peters says quite clear. He obviously takes an interest in New Zealand politics and was particularly concerned to ensure that a National Party government wasn't elected. Supplementary
question, the Honourable Bill English.
So can the Prime Minister confirm that the facts are that before the election in 2005, Owen Glenn had asked Mike Williams for his views about meeting Peters. After he had that meeting, he let Mike Williams know he had had the meeting. In December 2005, while they were having brunch together in Sydney, only minutes before Mr Glenn rang Mr Peters to confirm a donation of $100,000, and yet we are expected to believe that Mike Williams, who had expressed strong views about winning the Tauranga electoral petition, had no role at all in arranging or helping or assisting the donation that Owen Glenn made.
The Honourable Dr
The
Michael
member may
Cullen.
continue to write stories if he wishes. For example, just take one element of that story. He claims now that Mr Williams told Mr Glenn that Mr Peters had a very strong chance of winning the Tauranga electoral petition. Mr Williams has never said that, Mr Glenn has never said that, but Mr English chooses to interpret that because it joins the dots up better from his perspective. What we do know is that Mr Glenn made a donation to the Labor Party that was publicly declared at the time, unlike the $2 million funneled through the Waitemata Trust.
Supplementary question. The Right Honourable Winston Peters.
Could I ask the Minister, could I ask the Prime Minister this? does she not see the incongruity of the last question against the facts? For if it is Mr Williams that is raising the question of money, why am I being accused of being the one who raised money by the National Party and the ACT Party and every crown in the press gallery?
The Honourable Dr Michael Cullen.
Madam Speaker, I think what's fair to say here is the National Party is simply trying to repeat a kind of St Valentine's Day massacre and simply trying to ensure it lines up all its enemies against the wall before opening up the machine gun.
Supplementary question, the Honourable Bill English.
Supplementary. Can the Prime Minister confirm that the circumstances may need do need a full explanation when the period of August to December 2005 covered the whole period when the Labor-led government put together its coalition, and the facts are pretty straightforward that the President of the Labor Party was discussing with Labor's largest donor issues around meeting Mr Peters and then later on making a donation to Mr Peters? And when will the Labor Party give a full account of all exchanges regarding party finances between Mike Williams, Winston Peters and Owen Glenn at a time when they were making a coalition agreement?
Okay.
The Honourable Dr Michael Cullen.
The member is continuing to interpolate the facts as he sees them. Those are not the facts as are demonstrated in the public arena. The only facts that we do know is that Mr Key was acting as a bag man for the National Party. Mr Key had links with exclusive brethren. The National Party was funding over $2 million of anonymous donations through a trust, and Mr English and Mr Key call for transparency about party political funding.
Supplementary question, the Right Honourable Winston Peters.
Could I ask the Prime Minister, in the light of that last question, is it not a fact that Mr Glenn came before the Privileges Committee, and between the 12th of August and 14 December, although he had accurate records in some respects, he had no records whatsoever of the type that would back up the assertions made by Mr English, the ACT Party and certain uninformed members of the press gallery?
The Honourable Dr Michael Cullen.
It is a fact that Mr Glenn failed to produce evidence in support of some of the assertions that he was making. It is also a fact that since he left the company of his lawyers, his tongue has become looser and looser and his claims more and more outrageous.
Any further